Hey, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This is the show all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager, a farmer, or a food producer selling at farmers markets, or just a curious farmers market shopper, this is the podcast for you. On this week's episode of Tent Talk, our guest is Marcy Coburn, CEO of Center for Urban Education about Sustainable Agriculture in San Francisco. CUESA operates 5 weekly farmers markets in the Bay Area, which have been the proving ground for many incredible food makers. In our conversation with Marcy, we talk about diversifying farmers market communities, the importance of food education, and what it's like to be a bellwether of the food culture in California. Hey, I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I've spent years as an on-site farmers market manager, and I've done it all from pulling permits to social media marketing.
I'm another one of your hosts, Justine Marzoni-Mead, farmers market vendor, hot sauce maker, and event facilitator for the Intense Conference.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, Director of San Diego Markets, always on the road looking for new farmers markets and founder of Intense Business.
Welcome back to Tent Talk. This week, our guest is Marcy Coburn, CEO of the Center for Urban Education about Sustainable Agriculture. CUESA operates the renowned farmers markets at San Francisco's Ferry Building and in the Mission and at Jack London Square in Oakland, and also offers youth and adult educational programs on food, farming, and cooking. Prior to her role at CUESA, Marcy was the Executive Director of the Foodcraft Institute and Communications Director for the Ecological Farming Association. She is a prominent force in shaping the food culture of the Bay Area and transforming the industrial food system to one that's more sustainable, equitable, and delicious. And Marcy is one of our 2019 Intense Conference keynote speakers. Hi.
Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I commercial.
I can hear you. Okay.
We're here. We're all here.
Yay, we're here.
I'm actually right now at a pitch fair for National Bay Area, which just launched. And I was like, okay, I'll slip out for the interview. I'm sitting in my car outside. It's actually hot in the Presidio, which is unbelievable. I wore like 8 sweaters because I was like, it's going to be freezing. And it's like hot. So anyway, yeah. Okay, cool. So like, it's really interesting to me, this whole I'm getting more and more engaged in how farmers markets are really such, sort of informal and uncodified, like incubators for small business and how important we are in that.
You have to stop talking so we can start recording. Are we recording?
Oh,
we're recording. We are recording.
Yeah,
okay. Justine will figure out how to work it in. So she's saying good things. Wait till we're
I'll say that again.
Okay, good. Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to jump in. So you grew up in a farming family, right?
Yes.
And where was that?
So it was in the Central Valley. My family was in Exeter and Ivanhoe. So this is all like in the off of 99 corridor between Bakersfield and Fresno, along that corridor. My family were actually, if you ever read The Grapes of Wrath, was kind of our story, where they were part of the Oklahoma Dust Bowl and lost a bunch of land and migrated out to California to actually pick fruit, and then sort of worked their way into ownership of land. And my great-grandfather and my grandfather had a label, which was W.K. Winton and Sons, and they were grape farmers in the Central Valley during that time, and then eventually were doing citrus and walnuts later. But that's my family. Yeah.
Nice. And so has food always been a passion of yours, or farming?
Yeah, both. My family, I mean, it's so funny when you think back on your life and you think, oh, that was so normal. And then you realize not everybody had that. But we had, a huge pantry. Every single year we would harvest everything from apples to tomatoes to olives to, everything in every season. And we always had tons of it around, and we would preserve it, can it, and always had a huge, sort of repertoire, a pantry of preserved food. And then, so that was like, the 85 and before. Then after, like, it seems like around 85, it was like, we still were doing that, but there were a lot more people just eating processed food. And that became kind of the status quo, or that was how you got credibility amongst your friends, was what kind of frozen food you ate or something,
Yeah.
But
Kid cuisines.
it was like, but it was just definitely normal for my family to always have a lot of fresh produce around, but then also to put by everything that we grew.
That's the best thing to see in the world, all those shelves filled with glistening jars. My grandmother used to do that, and it was like, oh, we're rich. No matter what else happens, we've got this.
Yeah. I still think about it in terms of like, all of the thinking of, the world that we're living in with terrorism and all kinds of things, like, and how people stock water and stuff. I'm like, wow, those pantries were that was great insurance against anything happening.
Absolutely. Whether it's unemployment or disasters or what have you, it's having that food put by is a huge thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So then you went from there towards, it sounds like maybe more of the educational side of food. And, you may have had, did you waitress along the way to get there? But you've been with some big dogs that, EcoFarm is so huge for farmers in terms of training them. And then the Foodcraft Institute for food makers was pretty groundbreaking in classes for those little micro business folks, along, of course, with the farmers markets that do that.
Yeah, I was really interested in the intersectionality between farming and sort of the modern discourse around food. And growing up in the Central Valley, where it's very, very conservative, it's very Republican, it's very different from what life is like on the Bay Area side of things. I was always really interested in those conversations and sort of helping to orchestrate conversations across the aisle and, in food and around agriculture. And I was like, you have all these really amazing chefs on the Bay Area side who are sourcing all these incredible ingredients. You're growing the food, but you're not eating the food here in this community. You're sending it all to the Bay Area because that's where you're going to get the premium for your products. And like, how can we have this conversation more internally, amongst ourselves, and sort of have that be one of the ways that we can, try to find common ground. And there's so much common ground, but it tends to be the folks who grow the food feel one way and really isolated from folks who eat the food and who are isolated in another way. And so those intersections are really interesting to me.
They are really important. And it's actually, isn't it the unique place in the world for farmers markets? Because that's the one place all those folks come together.
Yeah. We can't make any assumptions about anyone's politics at the farmers market. And that's great, because that's not what we talk about.
Yeah, that's good.
Try not to.
So the ferry building market is, it's a pretty iconic thing in San Francisco. It was 20 years old when you joined the organization. How'd you end up as CEO of CUESA, and how smooth was that transition?
It was such an honor and a privilege to even be considered for the role of leading this farmers market, because it's so iconic. And for so many years, it's just been kind of, from my perspective, sort of like in the Bay Area, like the gold standard for farmers markets. Sure. And there's just such a chef relationships and such a, sort of iconic, deep movement history there. And I also saw that CUESA had a lot of potential in telling the story that they had been sort of humble about telling. And so it was an incredible opportunity, and I kind of jumped in full steam. And, a lot of my team have been with CUESA for 10, 14, 15 years. And so they have a lot more knowledge than I do about like the day-to-day operations. And I had not worked in farmers markets before. Unlike you, Kat, I didn't have, a history of launching and starting farmers markets. My experience had been in farming and in food. And so it was a, really serendipitous like connection of those two things. But I didn't have the expertise at all about putting tents up and dealing with health departments in mobile situations and all of those things. So that was a huge learning curve, and really still is. It's really interesting. And I take so much guidance from my leadership team around that. The ops team is just, amazing.
And has that gone pretty smoothly with them teaching you those parts and you maybe teaching them different ways of looking at getting the message out?
Yes. And we have grown. So since I joined, we were only at the Ferry Building. We had only ever been at the Ferry Building for 20 years. And, as wonderful and iconic and amazing as that location is, and we're never leaving, and that's our flagship, there was a lot of interest in sort of taking our mission and our operational standard to other neighborhoods and, exploring what it would be like to be part of other communities. And so, and I don't mean in the gentrification way. I don't mean come in and tell folks how to do it, but go in and listen to the communities and bring them into the experience, and then bring all of our resources and operational expertise to that experience. And so we, in 2016, took over operations of the Jack London Square Farmers Market, which is on the waterfront down in Oakland. And we can actually see the ferry building from that location. So we're right on the water. And then last year, we took over operations of the Mission Community Market, which is a Thursday evening market in San Francisco, right in the Mission neighborhood. And both of those experiences have been so great because they brought to us this whole community, not of just sellers, but shoppers and business owners and chefs and community that we weren't previously part of the CUESA family. And that it was so different to be in neighborhoods that were not the financial district,
Right.
Being down at the ferry building, we're just right there in the financial district. There's not a lot of like evening and weekend activities because there are more now, but there weren't a lot of residents down there for a long time. And so, it's been so great for CUESA. I really think we've really grown, not just in footprint, but in our capacity, and learned so much from those markets.
Well, yeah, and those are real different demographics too. I mean, Jack London gets some tourist trade, but it's mostly business tourists that are, downtown Oakland. Mission is much more just a neighborhood market. So you have such a, I mean, the neighbors definitely come out to the ferry building, but you've also got so many tourists there. So it's kind of a different demo entirely, I would think. I didn't realize that you took over the Mission market. I thought you'd started that one. So those were both markets that you assumed from other management groups.
Yeah, and I probably spent a year initially when I first got to CUESA exploring the possibility of a new market, which was down in Dogpatch. And, I think we talked about this, Kat, before, but we got so much feedback from sellers that no new markets, we can't keep up. We're making less than we used to make. More markets is not necessarily a good thing. And that's not really known. I mean, developers want farmers markets. Everyone wants farmers markets. Yeah. Neighbors want farmers markets. They think the more the better. And we're like, no, there's a limit to how to keep this profitable for the sellers. And
that's so true. But I'm looking now, I've turned down 3 markets in the last 8 months that developers have pitched that we should do it. And I keep saying it's not feasible. The vendors and the farmers don't want to be there. 2 of them have just opened, and they're full of farmers and vendors that I know that have said, don't open any new markets. So
it's so funny.
It's so funny. It's something I'm just sort of shaking my head at right this minute.
And I'm not completely opposed to it, but it's sort of an easier way. Both the Jack London and the Mission were markets that were really suffering and not doing well. And so it was very easy to say, hey, we really do have a network and the resources to revitalize this farmers market and let us take a shot at it and see.
And was it awkward with dealing with the people that were currently running the market? Did they come to you for help, or were they a little affronted that you were coming in to take over what they were doing, and the existing farmers and vendors? What kind of reaction did you get? I've taken over a market before, so I've had my experience at it, but I'd love to hear how that went for y'all.
Yeah, it is. It was, Alan Moy, it was Pacific Coast Farmers Market Association. They run many, many markets in the Bay Area. They have a very different model than us. We were not in conversation with them in advance. Actually, the entire square sold to new ownership, and the new ownership approached me and asked us if we would come in. We agreed. I made some assumptions about the fact that they had been communicating with the previous operator and that it was all above board. In retrospect, it wasn't.
It's just a very similar situation. That's so awkward.
So I very much regret that I didn't call Alan and have a conversation. We have talked since. And he definitely teases me. He's like, oh, you're coming after our whatever market next, and we have rapport. So, I mean, kudos to him and his integrity around that, because it's awkward. It's totally awkward. But, it was a market that had been in existence for 28 years when we took over. PCFMA was not the first operator there. And they, they had been in conversations with the ownership for a long time and nothing had really changed. And so I don't think it was a surprise to anyone, but And then Mission was run by volunteers who had full-time jobs and were really, really on hands and knees begging, please take this off our plate. So that was easier.
That's great. I'm excited to see the one in Mission too. I haven't been to that market. I'm excited to see how that's going.
So part of your mission at CUESA is to diversify farmers market communities. So can you talk a little bit about that, and how do you guys work to fulfill that mission, and like how do you measure your success? Because I know we work on that with our markets here, so I'd like to hear about how you guys are implementing that there.
Yeah, we have, the board of CUESA passed a strategic plan in 2016. We're actually going into sessions already next year for the next 3 years. But one of the initiatives that we all agreed on was this commitment to equity. And, we're now calling it diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And that has, it's many layers. And we absolutely don't feel like we're done or there. We have a lot to learn. It's been a huge learning experience for us. And, the history of agriculture and farmers markets is super complicated. I know you guys talk about that openly, stolen land, slavery, agriculture has some very dark and, not proud moments, right? So it's important to acknowledge that and, to say, okay, here we are in this place now, who's not here, who doesn't feel comfortable here, what can we do with our sort of resources and, for lack of a better word, like power, how can we use that to be allies, to bring more people to the table, to include more people in the conversation, and provide opportunities for people from all different communities and cultures and races and ages and abilities and, sexual identities and all of those things, and really do that with intention, not just do that because the people who are making those decisions in the moment care about those things, but really like codify that in the sort of point and the rules and sort of the guiding principles that guide the organization. So that's what we're in the process of doing. And we do it in lots of ways. We definitely consider someone's background when they're applying for the farmers markets. If they are a person of color, a woman, an LGBT owner, someone who is doing something interesting culturally with their food or their products, who is not part of what I would just call the sort of like heteronormative dominant paradigm, then they get to go to the top of the pile. And we're talking about that, and we're honest about that, and we want to provide opportunities. I mean, that is one of the very easy ways, right, that we can provide opportunities for people. We also strategically partner with groups who are doing that work. La Cocina is really well known here in the Bay Area. They incubate, almost exclusively immigrant women's businesses. And so we always have space for La Cocina vendors. There's like a rotating stall where they come through, and because many of them are in such early stages of their business, it's hard for them to, maintain like a year-round presence, but they come in scheduled waves. And so they get like 2 months where they really get to sort of vet their concept. And another group we work with is Kitchen Table Advisors, who they do business consulting for small farmers. And we prioritize their small farmers who are people of color and immigrants and, English as a second language, et cetera. And so we also do a similar sort of pop-up space for them. And many of them have actually graduated into full-time spots in the farmers market, which is, great. It's just our sort of way of sort of helping them get their sea legs in terms of, how to do it. Because, you don't just know how to do a farmer's market. Right. It's really complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like that's a good way, because people ask us, like, what are some tangible things that we can do to include and to welcome these people in? And it's like, well, we put the information out there, but how do we get people to participate and to want to be a part of it? And those are good examples of how you can do it. Offer a space that's a pop-up space, let them come in gradually, get your information to groups that are already working with people of color or new farmers or women or people of different communities. So that's good. We try to work with the IRC here, the International Refugee Community here, because they have farmers, but they can't come every week but if we offer them a space, once a month or on a special occasion pop-up basis, then usually they can gradually kind of move into a more regular participation at the farmers markets. And I feel like that's made a big difference. So we are always looking for new opportunities to do that. And I know managers ask us, from all over that we talk to through Intense, for ideas of how they can do that with their markets too. So I like that this conversation is happening, and I feel like it is something we need to talk about. And so it sounds like you guys are doing a great job there. Yeah.
I mean, the good food movement in general, I don't know if you use that term or relate to it, but like we have to start doing better in terms of this, like who's at the table, who are we promoting, who are we giving voice to. CUESA also, like you guys, does a lot of education and a lot of series. We do CUESA Talks, which is like educational series. Like, who are we inviting to speak? Who's moderating those panels? Like, who's writing the newsletter? Who's getting exposure? Like all of those things. We're looking at all of it, and like I said, we have a lot to do and a lot to learn, and we're open to all the feedback and all the learning that there is about it, because we really want to just proactively have the conversation and have the conversation with other farmers market organizations and other folks in the space. Like, how can we make our fundraising gala not look like it looks right now, which is, 95% white men who are, chefing at our events, those are all the Michelin star chefs in our town, so it's like not just our problem, it's everybody's problem. Like, this is a problem, when there are only 2 women Michelin chefs in the entire lineup, those kinds of things. Right. So yeah,
it's a process. So speaking about your educational programs, what are some other programs that you do with your education program at CUESA? You said you have CUESA Talks,
right? Which is a monthly series of conversations that we have with all kinds of different folks on different themes related to food and agriculture in some way. We just did a break down the ballot one on Monday night, which was great. So just folks coming and talking about all the different ballot initiatives and helping people weed through, the democratic process, which is beautiful but complicated.
Yes.
With the food and agriculture lens. And so that's an example. But we also run like huge youth education programs. So we serve over 3,000 public education elementary school kids in the farmers market. They come every Tuesday and Thursday in large groups as a field trip to the farmers market. And we're blessed to have this beautiful outdoor kitchen space that we work in. It's indoor, outdoor. Everything comes out on wheels and then goes back in. But we have permanent space. So the kids get an orientation, and then we give them all this CUESA bucks, and they go and shop the farmers market, and they can buy anything they want. They're chaperoned, obviously. And they buy a bunch of stuff, and then they come back to the kitchen, and they get to cut and prepare and prep and talk about it and spice it and flavor it. And then they all share what they've made with each other and talk about what they've learned. And so that's been a wildly successful program. We have again, we can't even serve all the kids that want to be part of it. And super, super great. So that's elementary.
Yeah, I want to go. Yeah. What a dream. That is amazing. That sounds like an incredible program for everyone. Yeah.
The youth. Send the millennials.
Send me.
So great. Yeah. And then at the end, actually, the teacher leads them in saying, "Thank you, farmers." Like, these little kids scream, "Thank you, farmers."
Oh my gosh. I want to cry.
And they're right below my office, and I get chills every time. I'm like, oh. So that's great. And then we have a high school program, which is Foodwise Teens. So that was Foodwise Kids. This is Foodwise Teens. And our Foodwise Teens are all in school gardens and growing food and learning about food. And then we actually are putting them through sort of professional development, entrepreneurship stuff, and education, business, marketing, sales, all of that. And then they come down to the farmers market, and we pay them to operate a stall at the farmers market where they're selling what they grow in their school garden.
Oh, great.
And really cool. And that's also really popular and really great. And we're actually looking at expanding it. We are going to add an after-school program. We're going to start paying the youth a stipend to not only sell their produce at the market, but also be in the education process, be part of the workshop in the garden process. And it's really a survey of sustainable agricultural jobs, but also skills building, confidence building, public speaking, mindfulness training. There's a culinary component. So the kids are taking what they grow and doing a value add product either in their school kitchen or in our kitchen, and learning how to, some cooking skills along the way. So ideally, by the end of it, several of them will be placed in internships with CUESA over the summer, and possibly also be interested in, working with one of our farmers or our chefs in their business. So that's
sounds
the
like
goal.
a great program. Do you find that your agriculture and health departments up there are pretty cooperative with you about that? Because it sounds like some of that would be challenging permitting wise.
Oh, that's such a good question. It's rough. I mean,
Or is this under the table and we're going to hope that those inspectors aren't listening to this podcast?
We have this kitchen that is permitted it's only on farmers market days, and we carry 3 separate permits, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, for our Ferry Plaza farmers market kitchen use. We are right now in the middle of a process, so this is all transparent with.
For the listeners who can't see us, we're all shaking our heads.
Separate
permits.
We're in the process of doing upgrades to our kitchen so that we can have a 7-day-a-week permit, which would be just a health permit that covers us 7 days a week, so that we can do programming in that space on other days.
The same programming you're doing 3 days a week?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And we do have some internal advocates in the health department who are fighting for us. But as you know, the bureaucracy is just insane. And so, nothing in this kitchen is going out for public consumption. Nothing's being resold. It's all just education. And still, it's very complicated to get those permits. So we're working on it.
Well, good luck to you.
I'm sure.
I'm sure it will work out. Those sound like incredible programs, though. Yeah, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
So you see the food education and tying into farmers markets. Do you guys have any kind of programs where we do Vendor 101 here, where we teach people that want to get started in farmers markets, just regular, business people that are starting small businesses. Do you guys have any kind of programs for that?
For the farmers?
For farmers and food makers that want to get started, like helping them with the permits or helping them just with application process. I'm always curious what other people's education is with their vendors.
With the sellers. Yeah, I've heard about that because I've been listening to your podcast, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to find out what that program is and copy it. No, we don't, not formally. Like, we don't have anything called Vendor 101, which I think is genius. Our ops team, our ops team is so hands-on and very operationally involved with all of our sellers, and our communications team is also really involved, but it's not in any kind of formal way. We do hold people's hands through the entire permitting process. We work closely with them, high touch, high customer service, but nothing that is fundable. So that's great to think about. And also just, having, something that's a little bit easier to sort of replicate amongst sellers. Right now, it's just highly, highly custom for everybody that we talk to.
That's kind of what we were doing. We're kind of walking everybody individually, one by one, through everything. And then our team just wasn't big enough. We couldn't handle the workload that takes. And so that's why we created the class. And so it's nice to get everybody in the same room, once a month, and have them, talk to each other and ask questions, and maybe people hear answers that they don't know that they were supposed to ask those questions. And
it's kind of a good part of the vetting process, because the fact that they're willing to pay a little bit of money and come to a class and that kind of thing, you sort of weed out the people that haven't really made the commitment yet.
Just kind of thinking about it.
Serious enough about it.
Yeah, and Kat, like you always say in the classes, it's a really good investment to find out if this isn't for you.
Sure.
Like, it's $100 and you could, it ends up saving you thousands of dollars if the farmer's market isn't your scene.
Isn't your thing. Yeah, so we're real clear about what it's like to operate there, and this is the time to get out, run away screaming, or back away quietly, or
I love that you're honest about that, because that is so huge, right? It's not for everyone. You have to have,
it's hard.
You can't, it's hard to be like risk averse and then be putting all your money and all your resources into this, hot sauce or something. I know that one of you.
Yeah. It's me, Marcy.
Sorry. No. It just came to me. I swear, but it's a big deal, right? And if you're not that if you don't have that thing, like that sort of like, I don't know, nerve, bravery,
physical stamina to
Yeah.
build your store every week,
Yeah, physical and emotional strength, and just can you
Yeah.
take the pressure? We see a lot of, not a lot, but we see vendors that come and they just can't seem to handle like the pressure that being a farmer's market vendor puts on you, and so it's like a variety
that
of jobs.
rejection.
That
when
rejection.
you give somebody a sample and they shake their head.
Yeah, it's crushing.
That's why I'm behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, and it's also very physically exhausting.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
people, look at it on social media and they think it's so glamorous and beautiful. Everyone wants to be in the farmer's market. And then it's like, you're literally standing on a street corner in the freezing cold or in the driving rain or the, heat wave or the fog.
Trying
or
to keep your
whatever. And
tent
it's
from
like,
blowing away.
yeah. And you're like standing and it's like, you're also just like perpetually for hours in this like small talk, vortex. It's so, if you haven't done it, it's so exhausting. So I talk about that a lot. I'm like, yes, this is glamorous. Yes, we're changing the world. And also you're just standing on concrete for hours.
I think we need to add something to Vendor 101 just to warn people. If you start a small business in the farmer's market, you're going to have to carry stuff all the time. Like I'm now obsessed with with carts and wagons just because we're constantly lugging things around.
Yeah.
Maybe we should make people stand up for the whole 5-hour class.
Yes, if a good training. You can't go to the bathroom. You have to
on
stay.
really hard concrete or asphalt.
We could do Vendor 101 and then Vendor Boot Camp.
Yeah, vendor boot
there we
camp.
go.
That's what we're doing.
Step 2. All right.
Standing in the
Great
sun.
idea.
You have to do small
Yeah.
talk for 5 hours. See if you can take it.
Yeah, because you can sit down on your cooler back there, but then no
but
one's
you don't
going to
sell
shop
things.
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
So
That's a chapter in our book. It's going to be called Small Talk Vortex.
Yes.
After 6.
Yes. You have to think it's really, really fun.
Yeah.
To say the same thing over and over and over.
Yes. Yeah. No, I like that though.
So, Marcy, the Ferry Building Farmers Market seems like it is this hub of, I don't know, kind of in the heart of the food scene in San Francisco. And I was wondering if you have any insight to why that is, or kind of how the Ferry Building has become this iconic a food mecca of the San Francisco food scene.
Yeah, it was on purpose. So our founder, Sabella Kraus, wanted to build an Institute of Agriculture in the city of San Francisco that was like the opera or like the symphony or like the, baseball stadium. Like she wanted something that would bring people together to talk about food and agriculture that was built like a heart, like built in a community building, heartfelt, connection way for people to come together to talk about and resource this thing, which was sustainable agriculture. And so that's why we have this crazy lofty name, the Center for Urban Education, about sustainable agriculture, and that partnership, like we started 25 years ago. This is our 25th anniversary this year. We started at the Ferry Building. We were across the street from the Ferry Building in 1993. So it was like the rubble from the earthquake in 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake, which, totally transformed San Francisco, the architecture. A freeway used to cut the Ferry Building off from the rest of the city, and Market Street would just dead end in this like 6-lane, high-rise freeway. And you could kind of see the top of the clock tower over the freeway, but that was it. And so the earthquake took care of that freeway. It was toppled, and it took several years to sort of clean up the rubble. And suddenly there was this like beautiful, iconic building at the foot of Market Street when you look towards Oakland, and it was like, people were like, oh my God. So, the farmers market started there, and it moved over time. It was, right in front of the Ferry Building, and then it was across the street, and then it was down the street at Levi Plaza, which is just, half a mile down the street on the Embarcadero. And then when the very forward-thinking developers of the Ferry Building were renovating it and thinking about it, they had this genius idea to turn it into this high-end artisan food hall. And they had that idea because of the farmers market, because there was already a tested market down there of people who were food curious and interested in agriculture and willing to spend a little more for a locally grown tomato. they'd already tested that because the farmers market was there and it was really well received and well attended. And so they designed this concept of this high-end food hall, which would be affordable space on the ground floor with some large anchor tenants, sur la table, slanted door, and then smaller kiosks for food artisans. Many of the places down in the Ferry Building don't have kitchens, so somebody would have to, prepare food off-site and come and sell it there. And there would be graduated sizes so that someone could come in and do, have a little kiosk and do some sales of a biscuit or a honey product. And then potentially, as they built their business, they could move into a larger and larger spaces. And that the farmers market was super integrated into that whole concept because that little honey or biscuit vendor would actually start in the farmers market where they pay $45 to be in a tent outside. And we sort of build that audience. Then they move into a little spot and then a bigger and a bigger and a bigger. And that concept has been, looked at and copied and tried to be replicated all over the world for 25 years because it was the first of its kind to really do that in the United States. And so that is why, and we are also literally geographically located right in the very middle of San Francisco. So it's on one side is, water and Alameda Bay and Treasure Island and then Oakland, and then we're right at the foot of Market Street. We're basically, at the heart of the 7x7 in terms of San Francisco's square footage. So our mileage. And so, I think about that a lot. It's like we're literally at the heart of the city, but we're also in this amazing relationship with landlords and the port of San Francisco and the city, who really saw and cultivated and cared for that relationship. So, we get folks all the time who come down there. I lead tours with, ambassadors from all over the world who are like, how can we do this in our town? And I'm like, get developers who will put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Get people who care about this enough to figure out a financial model that will include lower rent for small food artisans, because that's the only way you're going to get those folks to be able, that we know the margins are so low here in terms of food, and especially if you're sourcing good food and you're paying your workers a livable wage and you're offering benefits and you're trying to do right as a business owner, like those margins are so low. Like rent out the other 2 floors of the building to tech companies who can afford the rent, but give those food artisans a break and give them a chance to be there. And don't expect them to match the rent that a technology company can match. It's just not the same math, right? We know that. It's not at all the same math. So
well, do you think cities have an obligation, or should they be subsidizing this? Because developers too that are coming in at this point and buying at what California real estate prices are, it's tough for the developers to subsidize that too, at this stage. So should there be some governmental help? Food is a thing that we should be promoting, right?
It would be great for cities to support that. And, everyone loves farmers markets in the sense of community and the beauty and the children and the lovely food and the feel good vibes. And so I'm always having this conversation like, great, I'm so happy that we can provide this incredible service for your city, your community, this place, this neighborhood. And we need your help. You have to advocate for us. We can't just move around, fill in the cracks of your development projects, or, we need you to guarantee that a certain number of people are going to walk by this corner in order for us to be successful. And I know you guys are deep in all of these conversations as well, but, and shoppers need to come and shop. Yeah. You don't just come and taste all the fruit and not buy anything. Like, please support the farmers. Like,
you tweet it, you eat it.
Yeah.
So good.
If you're in the Instagram story, if you post on Instagram stories, you have to buy something.
Make a purchase.
This is a thing that will go away if you don't support it. Right. And it's not just here on accident. It's not just a bunch of farmers who got together and threw a party. Like, it is, it's a real thing that we have to support and cultivate and care for. And, folks people love to tell me, like, every time my folks come to town, I take them down to the farmer's market. And I'm like, and you're getting your food at Trader Joe's the rest of the time. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, Trader Joe's is awesome, but it would be really great if you could put that money directly in the hands of the farmer. Like, just, try it. Just come try it once in a while. Like, go to the farmer's market. Sure, you have to carry your bags, a little more work. You might have to walk a little further, but like, do it,
Yeah. And you guys have Veggie Valet. Yeah. Makes it easier.
Yeah, we have a lot of things to help people, but and we have a lot of amazing shoppers. I don't mean to be disparaging of the folks who are so devoted, and I was that kind of farmers market shopper before. I know it's like bordering on, insane, the amount of produce that I haul home every weekend. Yeah. And I'm like trying to keep up on it, and I do manage to somehow, but sometimes I'm like, why do I do this to myself?
The onus is definitely on the shoppers, and if you want these farmers markets around, you got to shop them. And then developers, if you want them in the area you're developing, you have to help out the vendors and the market managers in terms of making it affordable and feasible. Are there any things that vendors and market managers or farmers can do to plug themselves in or to be more in step with their local food scenes? Are there things that that we could do on the back end to, we can't make a earthquake happen or how but
thank God. Yeah.
That'd be terrible.
Yeah. No one wants that. I feel, we as an organization that supports all of these sellers and does all of this work and cares so much about it, we're really active on social media, and that does really, it's almost like, a multiplier of many hundreds when the vendor is also active on social media, because then we can, sort of play off each other. And our really successful sellers are also actively selling. And we know that's hard from the farmer perspective. This is a lot easier if you're baking pies or doing something like that, that's, you're not out in the fields at 3 a.m., et cetera. But for those of our folks who have cultivated their own followers, have, that do deals, or they put stuff out on their social media, like, we have the most amazing strawberries this week, or you've got to come out and check out this white peach, it's incredible, or whatever, like, that really helps their sales. And we can play on that. We can tag it. We can, we do try to get around and give everyone, spread the love, of course. But also when folks are doing that for themselves, it's so helpful. And we know, like, your white peaches can develop almost a cult following. I mean, people are so obsessed with, like, the most amazing ingredients and the, incredible products. And it's not super hard to sell if you just do it, right? Because people will come. If you talk about what you're doing, people will come and check it out, and they'll get excited, and they'll take pictures with it. And,
Take a picture and then buy it.
And then buy it.
And then buy it.
Yes.
Just try it.
That's right.
That's awesome. All right, so we're wrapping up, or we're short on time. We could talk to you forever, and luckily we're going to have you at Intent, so we can talk more and more and more. Right. But we, as you know, because you've listened to our podcast before, we like to wrap up with a question of the week, and so this perfectly ties in with what we were talking about. But the question for this week is, what is one thing that you wish the general public was more informed about in terms of food or farmers markets? So if you could give one lesson to be learned for shoppers, what would it be? So we'll give you a second to think about it.
Okay.
Who's starting? Me? I'm starting the same thing I say all the time. Yes. I think it's amazing how many people don't realize that the amount of money that goes in a farmer's pocket or a food maker's pocket when you buy directly from them is so different than if you buy from Walmart, who happens to have an end cap with one local farmer, hoping that you'll think that the rest of the produce department is also local. Even if it was all local, if you're buying it from a big grocery store, the distributor and the trucker and the grocery people, all those folks have to make their money. We need them to make it on the things that they make it on, stuff in boxes and cans. And we need the farmers to be making the money on produce. And they can't do that if all those middle folks are taking a chunk out. It leaves them with literally pennies on the dollar. So it's really critically important, if you want to continue to have fresh food in your life, that you buy directly from farmers so that they can keep farming, because otherwise they just can't. So I was talking to a farmer a couple days ago who said, "This chicken farm is not a petting zoo, people. I can't afford to keep these chickens unless we sell the eggs and, sell the chickens."
Yeah. Make it happen. Yeah. I would say I just had this conversation yesterday with a girlfriend of mine because I don't know if it's happening if you have an iPhone, but there's a new thing that pops up that tells you how much screen time you've had recently.
Frightening, isn't it?
Yeah. First of all, it was horrifying. Second of all, I was like, oh, okay. So when I say I don't have time to do certain things, it's really I do. And then just prioritizing being on my phone. Okay, I get it. But so I was just thinking, making a time investment to come to the farmer's market, because it does take more time. It does take more time.
Yeah.
I have 3 kids. I'm busy. Going to the grocery store is much easier for me to do my family's grocery shopping. And going to the farmer's market, I know my time is probably tripled because I know a lot of people there, so I end up in conversations. But if you have to make a purchase at every single booth, it is just takes up more of your time. That's just how it is. But it's making that investment in that kind of time versus other things you're doing with your time, like maybe an hour on Instagram, maybe spend 45 minutes of that shopping. And so I wish that people would kind of take a look at their time usage a little more clearly, because it's just so important to make sure you're getting that good food that you want. And so you have to just put a little bit of extra time in to go shop from local farmers and vendors at the farmer's market, and just what a difference that can make in your life. And it's not really that we don't have the time. I really think we all have the same 24 hours in a day that Beyonce has, or whatever the saying goes. But it's, how we invest our time. So I wish people would kind of pay attention to that a little bit more and just make the effort to make the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Justin?
Yeah.
Okay, mine is kind of a spin on cats because that was what I was going to say, but it's related. I think there is a perception that things at the farmer's market cost way more than they do at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And in some instances that may be true, but for the most part, if you do kind of shift your purchasing habits to shopping at the farmer's market, I think, at least for me, I end up spending less money because I only buy what I know that I'm going to be able to eat. Mm-hmm. And then I also keep that in the back of my mind that, okay, this head of cilantro costs more than it would if I just bought it at the store, but I know it's the farmer is keeping most of that, and I won't buy 3 heads for $1 because I know I'm only going to go through one in a week. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I spend $2 on one that I'm going to use, and so it just kind of helps me keep my waste in check. I don't overbuy stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it just, it makes people a little bit more mindful about what we're consuming, and then when we are consuming stuff, we know that money is going to people that we see and we buy and we love, and we meet at the farmer's market. So just a little shift in perspective, I think, is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So mine is, I'm just going to play on everything you all just said, which is so awesome. Mine is about political and social engagement, and the fact that shopping in a farmer's market is actually a political and radical act, and that can be a call to action to folks who want to engage more, who are thinking and feeling like they aren't engaged enough, or there's, what's the armchair activist sort of thing that happens where you just like things on Facebook, but you don't actually do anything to change society. And going and actually shopping at a farmer's market is radical, and we need a lot more people to do it. And the more people that do it, the more money that stays in the local economy, the more we support the land and the farmers who grow on the land. And it's an ecological, it's a planet-based, it's earth-based, and it's also it's better for economies. It's actually economically better for you to keep your money in your economy and not give it to a huge national conglomerate and who's sourcing ingredients from all over the world. And that's fine, but it's important to remember that this can be not just a great way to nourish your body, take care of your family, do the right thing, and have a beautiful experience. You can do all of that, and you can also participate at a civic level by simply shopping at a farmer's market.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you want to stick it to the man, shop at the farmer's market.
Yeah. I mean, this is also, it's a cash economy. They're, still, I mean, if you can even
IRS is
completely be
listening
off
to
the
our
radar
podcast.
if you want to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stick it
That's
to the
awesome.
man shop at the farmer's market. I can see that as a T-shirt this
I
year.
know.
Intense.
I'll sell them at the farmer's market.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like it. All right.
All right, well, we have another interview we have to get to, but Marcy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, and we cannot wait to have you in San Diego in February.
Yeah.
I can't wait either. So lovely to talk with you guys. Thank you very,
Nice
very
talking to
Thanks,
you.
much.
Marcy. We'll
Have
see
a
you
good
soon.
one.
Okay. Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening along. Please leave us a review on iTunes and tell us how you liked today's episode. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss our next episode. And if you want more farmers market tips, you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter at intensebusiness.com and follow us on Instagram at intensebusiness. That's INTENTS business. Marcy will be joining us at the Intense Conference in February to talk about issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice in the farmers market and good food movement. The 2019 Intense Conference will be held in San Diego, February 24th through the 26th. Marcy will be there. Will you?
This podcast is produced by Intense Business, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni-Mead. Original music by David Mead. Special thanks to our guest, Marcy Coburn and San Diego Markets.